Coach DeMarco here with another Get Better Basketball Live. And today my guest is Burton Uwarow, head basketball coach at Bob Jones University. Coach Uwarow is going to talk about their highly successful pressure defensive system. You're not going to want to miss it. Another Get Better Basketball Live is up now. Coach DeMarco here with Coach Burton Uwarow, head basketball coach at Bob Jones University. Coach, I'm excited to have you on tonight.
I'm excited to be here. I've followed along with your chats, even if I haven't been able to participate. Almost always weekly, I go back and I bookmark things that I learned from a chat. That's been a great source for me, and it's something that you probably would never know if I hadn't come on tonight, but it's been a very valuable tool to me.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. There's a lot of great coaches like yourself who share in the chat, and we're very fortunate to have kind of built that community. And I learn so many new things every week, and fortunate to have it kind of continue to grow over time. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit tonight. We're going to talk about your pressure defensive system. Excited to talk about that because I've had Tony Miller on in the past, and we started to dive into your half-court defense a little bit that you guys run at Bob Jones University. But before we get into that, I was looking at your backstory, and I saw you did some head coaching high school in Georgia, and now you've kind of made your way into the college ranks. So curious to learn a little bit more about your backstory, because I know there's a lot of coaches out there, high school coaches who might aspire to go the college route one day. So I'd love to learn more about that.
Bob McKillop has coached it at every single level, and I'm not Bob McKillop, but I just think it's interesting that a couple of the coaches that I really admire, they didn't skip any levels, and they worked. I think there's something valuable to coaching at each level. I started coaching middle school when I was in college, and then after college, I had a combination of having really good athletes, but they didn't, they knew what they didn't know. They really were looking to you for help. And so I was able to make a lot of mistakes. There's maybe 3 or 4 people at every middle school game, and there's not a whole lot of crowd pressure. So I was able to try a bunch of different things. And, if you have the ability to do that, where the stakes are not that high, I think that's very valuable for a coach. And then I was able to work at Malden High School. It's a home of Kevin Garnett, and here locally. And I was able, he was no longer there. I was at the middle school when he was in high school, but I was able to work as an assistant there. Went up to Washington, D.C., and was an athletic director and coach there. Moved down to Georgia, and I started a program there. And so we were able to, I was at a private school where we were in the midst of just adding a grade each year. And I took over and started a program when they were in 10th grade. We played a varsity schedule. And so by the time those kids were seniors, we were pretty good. They got beat a lot and by a lot the first year, but we surprised some people with our pressing. And I feel, Georgia's now voted to have a shot clock, but back then they didn't. And I feel like pressing really gave us a chance to make the game a little bit more even and get more possessions. In my opinion, when you're not as talented, you want as many possessions as possible to get as many chances to shoot as possible. So that's a little bit how that evolved. Bob Jones here had recruited some of my players, and we had come to their team camps and stuff like that. And our current athletic director was both the athletic director and the coach here. And he kind of handpicked me, so to speak. He knew, I think, that he wanted me to fill his place. And so, most people wouldn't like to be at a place where the former coach is there, but he has made it really welcoming, and it hasn't been awkward at all. He's been a very valuable supporter of our program.
That's awesome. That's quite a journey, Coach, through different states, different schools, and up to the college ranks. And just curious, where you've coached at the middle school level, and I have some experience at that level, and then obviously high school, junior varsity, so through high school, but not college. But curious, like the challenges at each level, or even just comparatively between the high school and transitioning to become a college coach. What was that transition like for you? And what were some of the challenges, or maybe some of the things that, really transferred pretty easily from the high school game into the college game?
From middle school to high school, from middle school, I was just starting out coaching, and, I didn't know what I didn't know. And, I couldn't wait to vomit all the information I knew all over my players. And, I really tried everything under the sun. And, that ended up being a good thing. But for them, they probably didn't have the best middle school experience. But, I learned really quickly that, it's what your players know, not what you know. And, sometimes the most lasting lessons are the painful lessons. And I learned that at the middle school level. And, high school, I ran some really vanilla stuff. I ran 5-out offense. Never was the most talented. We went to 5 straight Final Fours and 4 straight state championships, and we won 3 of them. And we did some similar things, but we didn't do the exact same thing every year. But our defense was consistent. Offensively, 5-out, but we would change what we would do. And we would press, but if I didn't have a great pressing team, then we would not be as aggressive. But there's something that really bothers me about somebody being able to come down and just doing what they want to do. I really wanted to try to take people out of what they wanted to do. And so I came to college. We made it to the national championship my first year. Went on, I think it was a 16-game winning streak at the end to finish out the season, and we lost the national championship by a bucket. And I had mostly juniors and seniors, and so that was this is year 4 for me, so that was 4 years ago. And so year 1 and 2, I really didn't try to change a whole lot. They had never really pressed, and so last year. I had a really young team, and I've got the youngest team in our history this year. And now's the time for me to get back into pressing. I've been able to recruit more guys who I think will fit that style. And so, that's a little bit of change between high school and college. We play the pack line defense here, and I did that in high school. But in high school, you don't have as many guys that are going to game in and game out that are going to beat you from the outside. And in college you do. And so, some of the ways, like I forced baseline in high school because people weren't going to make us pay with that. But in college, people really they can make you pay if you're not really great at doing that. And so in college, we don't really force either way. We kind of influence middle, but I wouldn't say we force either direction.
Coach, interesting because I also am a pressure defensive coach and really like to kind of control the tempo of the game. So I know we're going to get into that a little bit, but one last question I want to ask you, and I appreciate you kind of taking us through the transition between each level. Now it looks like at Bob Jones, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys are now transitioning to the Division III level.
Right.
And I would love for you to talk a little bit about what that experience has been like from junior college level. Am I correct in saying that? Into the NAIA?
Well, it's NCCAA, and there's a lot of schools that are NCCAA and D3. They tend to be more in the Midwest, but we're a school that hasn't given scholarships, and that's the way our school set up is part of our mission. That's not even something that we're looking at. And but as probably know at that level, there's a lot of times where we give better financial deals than D2s based on a kid's grade or what their major is, or we give really good things, financial help to minorities. And so there's a lot of ways that we're actually better prepared than maybe some D2s. And we have incredible facilities. We've hosted Zion Williamson was close by, and we hosted some of his high school games, and we've hosted Adidas Gauntlet stuff, and we have nicer facilities than a lot of the D1s and D2s around here. So that's where our level's at. We usually spend most of first semester playing D1s, and the NCAA just a week ago told them when they could start, and so we are not their first call. They're looking at Duke and people like that to get on their schedule first. So we're not entirely sure what our schedule is, but we'll be the only D3 in South Carolina. And we had a couple of schools. Presbyterian used to be, and I think a couple others at one time were D3, but now they're all D1s. And so it'll be good to be the only show in the state that way.
Yeah, and we have a kind of mix up in Massachusetts from D1 all the way through, and we see the Division II teams competing against Division I and even Division III schools. So I think a lot gets put into those different divisions, but you brought up good points. There's financial opportunities that are great at the Division III level, maybe better than some of the higher levels, and then also the competitiveness. There's teams at all levels that compete, and great players at all levels.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think Division III and Division II, you see some better players. And with Duncan Robinson now playing in the, I know he went to Michigan for a year, but playing in the NBA, I think that's a good example. But there's so many players like that that are so highly competitive. It's just great. It's great basketball.
It is. Duncan Robinson's a hero to a lot of people. I mean, but he is what a lot of Division III players are. He's just fantastic and well-rounded, and not everybody's like that, but I think people would be amazed how many professional basketball opportunities are available for people that play D2 and D3 and NAIA. We've had a number of people go play professionally overseas, and we've even had a few Division I transfers come here, and they just realize what they get told in recruiting, that the fit wasn't there where they went, and they wanted to be somewhere where they were going to be the guy and play some really important minutes. And they've had really good careers here when they've done that.
Could you talk a little bit about what you're doing defensively now? I know you mentioned that you were a pack line type coach. Now it sounds like a little bit more pressure defense. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I had gone to college in Wisconsin, and I had actually seen Tony Bennett play, and Wisconsin is really where the pack line was born in different colleges, and especially a lot at the D3 level in Wisconsin. And so I've been a pack line guy. I left Wisconsin and I came back here, and I was running the pack line in South Carolina, and everybody was telling me what a wonderful matchup zone it was. We don't really have a name, but we are in the gap still. But we are not making passes as easily completed as you normally would in a pack line system. And so, we pick up full court pretty much every possession. My goal is to get you to cross the half court line on one of the outer thirds. And if it can be the ball handler's left side, that's a huge win for us. And, part of it is just taking up the shot clock, not letting them run what they want to run. And, whether that's full court man-to-man or, our 2-2-1 is our base, that's kind of where we're at right now.
Pressure defense is kind of close to my heart, something we always did in the teams I coach. So I'm excited to take a look at some of what you have to share in terms of diagrams.
All right. For anybody listening, I have contact information at the end, and if I go too fast, I am more than happy to send this stuff out for you. 2-2-1 is our base. I think everything you do stems from your philosophy. So your overall philosophy should affect how you coach defense and how you coach offense and what's important to you. So we try to have a player-led team here, and our offensive and defensive philosophy demonstrate that we want them to lead and make those decisions. But your practices have to be really good, and you can't be worried about your practices being beautiful, because they won't be. But the game's not beautiful. And if we realize that we don't have as much control as we think we have, the quicker we realize that, in my opinion, the better. And so number two, if you want a player-led program, I think everything you do should show that. Once I've got mostly freshmen and sophomores this year, and they won't be able to do this right away. But once they're familiar with all this, I'll let them tell me what alignments or stunts or even what lineups they think will be really good in pressing against whatever team we're facing, or what changes we need to make. If one of the guys in there thinks that somebody is not hustling and he's not doing a great job as an interceptor, or he's not sealing traps, I want them to tell me that, because I would be foolish to think that I could notice everything from the bench. My philosophy is also to break the other team's practice habits. I worked for Morgan Wooten for years at his camp, and did a lot with him when I was in DC. And he said, really, that's your goal of practice, is knowing the other team well enough to know what they're probably going to be doing, and then breaking their practice habits. And I refuse to let my opponent come down and run their sets and feel comfortable. That's whether we're playing Division I's or we're playing Division III's. It really doesn't matter to me. We are who we're going to be. And I don't like it when a set works against us, when we've scouted it and we've showed how to take that away.
I think one great point there too, Coach, is, one of the things I've always heard, and when teams would play us, is how much time they had to put in to prepare for our pressure defense. And I think a lot can be said about that, because, teams have to really, emphasize it in practice. And then if it's not natural for them, they're not a pressure team. They're putting 6 players on the floor, and they're coming up with unique ways to kind of, prepare for that. So in terms of like disrupting the opponent, I think a big part of that can be what they're doing in practice, and really kind of getting in their head a little bit as well.
Right. And, if it's not something that they're doing every day, they might have success, in high school when you have quarters, they might have success in the first quarter, but it will be very difficult for them to have success over the entire game if it's not something that they're doing every day. I think it helps you use more players. I think it helps your defense to be more aggressive and communicate. My personal philosophy most of the time is to start off pressing and then work on my half-court defense. And a lot of people will tell you not to do that. And, I've got to do me. And, I think if they've got a lot of area to cover, and, I'm teaching them to be aggressive and communicate, I'm more worried at the beginning of the year in preseason. I'm more worried about the attitude of defense than the X's and O's of defense. I want them to know as soon as we start practice, they're going to have to face defensive pressure. Our ball handler is going to have to face really good defense the very first practice of the year. And our defense is going to be up in somebody's face, not letting them see down the court. That's the very first drill we're going to do after we warm up. We're able to start practice next week. And, I just want the attitude of, I'm not going to let you do what you want to do. And so that carries over to number 6. It helps your offensive decision-making earlier in the year, especially us, where we're going to play a lot of D1s. And D1s traditionally have had basically practice year-round, and we're not able normally to start till October 15th. And usually we're playing a D1 2 weeks later. The only thing I can do to simulate D1 athleticism and speed is to really start being aggressive from day one. And it forces me to take my hand off the reins. We're only allowed so many timeouts. We do have media timeouts at my level, but, if you want it to be a player-led program, you can't be calling timeouts and taking care of everything all the time. Again, I said I want them to cross half court on the outer third. If they do this, this helps me establish ball side and weak side early. And especially if I'm able to go down the ball handler's left side, even if they're left-handed, I think that's an advantage. But especially if they're not left-handed, I think we won a huge battle there. Why the 2-2-1 alignment? I personally think it's the most versatile alignment. I can get into anything that I want to get in if I teach the 2-2-1 alignment first. And it can be aggressive, but also protect the basket, where if you're in a 1-2-1-1 or, switching with a lot of stuff, you can really leave that basket open. And I think this gives you the best mix. If you haven't pressed a lot, I think this is a good press to start with. I've coached girls and I've coached, middle school, where kids, they tend to not be able to make as long of a pass as high school and college males can. And so, if you're coaching one of those teams, middle school or coaching high school girls, that may be something that you really want to put in, to take advantage of the fact that, they can't throw at 94 feet. I'm not saying that girls and middle school guys can't throw it long. It's just going to be a little bit different. I use it off makes and misses. Coach Renner at Ballard High School in Louisville, Kentucky. When I was in Georgia, I drove and I met him in Kentucky just because I had done my research, and he's the first coach I knew who really had a lot of success pressing off of misses. And, if we get into our 2-2-1 spot off of misses, you think of where you're at. You're strong up the middle of the court. It gives somebody an easy place to run to. And if you're really small and know that you're not going to be able to get a lot of rebounds, I would say just get into this and set your defense and don't even go for a shot. Once you shoot it, just get back into your defense and create more opportunities that way, because you're not going to be able to create a lot of opportunities with your rebounding. Something that was unique when I started doing it, I think more people probably do that now, is I would put my big men up front. If I want my big men to get beat, I want him to get beat 94 feet away. And and it's also, if he is able to trap, if you've got two big people trapping a guard, that's a hard pass for that guard to make. And that's a really high pass for him to make. And the higher the pass, the more chance of intercepting. And if you have all the other athletic guys looking to be interceptors, then that's a really good thing too. And so we press off of free throws. If it's a big guy or whoever's taking their free throw, they move into the front left of the 2-2-1, and they're immediately there. So we're right there on the second shot of a two-shot foul. We don't have anybody in the lane. We just have that guy shooting the free throw, and then he's right into our press.
Coach, just a question on the 2-2-1 alignment. I played around with this a little bit my last year. I had a very veteran team. We did very, very well. I had coached them since they were freshmen, and 3 of them had started for all 4 years. So I was fortunate at the high school level to be able to be a little more creative. And we would use some zone type pressure alignments like a 2-2-1, and we would run and jump out of it a little bit. So we might, we typically were on the ball, person on the ball, run and jump, but we also did a diamond press as well. But we put some wrinkles in, and one of them was to kind of use a 2-2-1 alignment and then jump into some man. And I'm asking this because seeing the 2-2-1 alignment, it sounds like there's some zone pressure, but you also talked about man-to-man. So when you do your man-to-man press, is it out of the 2-2-1 alignment, or do you put someone on the ball, or do you do a little bit of both? Just curious in terms of this alignment, if you use it for zone pressure and man pressure, which would be tough for opponents to really be able to decipher.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that I don't do anything all the time. So I have done that, and I've done that a lot. I especially did that in high school. I have not done that in college yet, but one of the resources I have here listed at the end of my presentation is Andy Landers was the women's coach at Georgia, and he's got a really good man press. And whenever somebody is on the ball, they have the defender here and the defender here is straddling the on-ball defender's shoulders. And so that guy who's dribbling the basketball knows that whichever way he drives, there's going to be somebody there. And so we kind of use that as our man alignment where it looks like it's man-to-man, but we are not guarding. We're really 5 guys guarding the ball. It's probably better termed a ball press than a man-to-man press. But I think we're saying the same thing. To the guy dribbling the ball, it looks the same as everything else. That's a good question. Some general pressing rules: don't get beat the same way twice. I'm going to show some stunts here. That's really what's made our press really effective is the different stunts. And my team has to know which stunt will take away whatever just beat them. So, you're going to get beat, but you're going to get beat no matter what defense you play. And I want them to know, so I don't have to call a timeout every time. I want them to know if they just did this, don't let them do that the next time that we're in our full court press. Make them do something different. And so I'll script scenarios in practice. We all should know our league well enough to know what somebody's probably going to do against our press. And so I'll script, like the top 3 scenarios of what people try to do. And I'll make the players come up with answers, and that doesn't happen right away. It happens through us filming practices and them seeing it and all of that. But they'll get it if you stick with it. Short memory. If you get scored on, I absolutely hate when we get scored on and I've got a guy who walks the ball up the court and acts defeated and acts like the world just ended. If you score, we better be scoring right away. I don't even want us to remember that they just scored on us. I want it to be so fast. I don't want to be so stupid that we make a turnover, but I don't want to act like scoring against our press is a victory for them. This is a famous quote, but it's true. People will say, man, you'll hear parents in the stands, you need to get out of that press. You're getting beat. No, you're getting beat with how you're playing the defense. If I'm not doing this well, in my opinion, no matter what I switch to, to me, it's about effort and it's about execution. And if I have a person that's not doing their job, I probably need to make a personnel change more than I need to make an X and O change. And last, I don't think you can be half pregnant. You either are or you aren't a team that will utilize the press. It can't be something, you're not going to do it well if it's something that you do every once in a while. Your kids aren't going to buy into it. You're not going to be very good at it. And you're going to come to a game where you're down and you really need it. And, I just don't think that you're going to be successful. I've tried that. This is 25 years running different presses and scenarios. And that's my belief after 25 years is that it's not something that you can do halfway.
Love number 3, Coach. I feel like pressure defensive teams get kind of a bad rap of like, you're going to get beat over the top and teams are going to, and that wasn't really my experience with it. So I love that quote because, it's how you're playing the defense that really makes a difference. And all types of defenses get beat. There's so many great points you made about that. So I love that quote.
Any press is more effective. You can make them cross half court on the left-hand side. I've said that a couple times. Every alignment has 2 trappers, 2 interceptors, and 1 basket protector. And, coaches like to come up with special names for all of that. And I think that can be effective. It could be a point of pride that you have names for these people in your program. But I just labeled them that because I want people to come up with their own stuff. But that's what happens. And, they need to know what their job is. And you're always going from one job to the other. So as soon as you leave being a trapper, you become an interceptor or a basket protector. This is something that I teach. It's kind of unusual, but I started doing it at the high school level. I have them cross their arms. They're not going to foul that way. It's hard to pass that way. If you think about guarding a ball handler like this, he's probably going to go down around you and make a bounce pass, which is a really slow pass, or he's going to try to go over you if you've got 2 guys in a trap like that. But he's not going to fake down and then go over your head, which is what beats you a lot of times. He is going to do something that's a lot slower. And, it might be a stupid thing, but it's something that has worked for me. It takes guys a while to get used to that. But I totally cut down on my number of on-ball fouls by just having people do that. Interceptors, just like a safety, you can read a quarterback's shoulder. If he's going back like this, a right-handed quarterback has a really hard time running left and then coming back across his body and passing downfield. And it's really the same thing for somebody caught in a trap. They are most of the time going to really tell you what they're doing, and you can be cheating towards that way based on where their shoulder is. Don Meyer used to call it a dork press sometimes. If the ball gets back to their dork, deny everybody else to make the dork bring the ball up. And, sometimes he used some more colorful language there, but we'll stick with dork. We teach, the there's one guy who's responsible for stopping the vertical movement up the court. And that person, if at all possible, you want them to straddle out of bounds. We tell that other guy, the next guy in, he's the one that's supposed to close the door and he's supposed to form the L. And so their legs are actually straddled in an L like that. And if their legs are straddled and their arms are up, you really did close the door. They can go outside, but they should never be able to go through. You're getting me ready for practice now. I'm ready to get on the court.
I'm getting fired up here just talking about the defense. I'm ready to get out there and start coaching. So this is awesome.
I'll probably pull a hamstring the first day, ready to go. There's some calls. I've got a diagram for each one of these, so I'm going to skip through this a little bit, but they're different calls that I make just out of our basic 2-1. We call it UConn. I got my basic rotations from when Jim Calhoun was at UConn. He used to run a 2-2-1 press, and so our base alignment is out of that. Up is aggressive. Traps will be before half court. We're really trying to push tempo a little bit and take a few chances. If they only have really one really good ball handler, this would be something that we do a lot. We want that guy to face that early, and while he may have some success early, he's not going to have success in the fourth quarter. That's what you got to instill in your guys. Down is, I would say it's less aggressive. I'm trying to force ball reversal. Sometimes I just do down because 4 passes to 1 goes up a little bit, reverses it to 4, and then 4 ends up reversing it to 3, and 3 dribbles up the left-hand side of the court. So if I really want the ball to go up the left-hand side of the court, if I think this guy is really, really right-handed, I'm going to call down just for the fact that I want them to reverse it back. I'm basically remote control where I want that guy to go. Sometimes it's to take time off the shot clock. We've got a 30-second shot clock, and it's not unusual for us to take 8 to 10 seconds off of an opponent. And we're playing a D1, that's a big thing. And I often use this in conjunction with our freak defense. It's called a bunch of different things, but, oftentimes we drop back into a zone, and it's really just to change the tempo of the game. We're not really a zone team, but we'll zone for like 3 passes, let's say. We'll say whatever color it is, we'll say blue 3, and after 3 passes, we're in man-to-man. So they've already had to face a 2-2-1. They've already had to go down one side, reverse it, go down the other, and now they think that we're in a matchup zone, and then we switch into man-to-man, and that becomes a lot for them to handle, especially if we keep changing zone alignments.
Love what you guys do defensively, Coach. Everything you're talking here is it's great. It's great stuff.
So this is a little bit kind of what you were talking about. This is our run and jump. It's really a run and trap. We do, for people who may not be familiar, run and jump is technically when you go middle out of this. Run and trap is when you go sideline. And so, right now we're not running and jumping. If one were to dribble middle, we wouldn't jump that right now. I don't have enough experienced guys, but we will trap. So one is cutting off the vertical movement. He's cutting off one's progress. X1 is cutting off one's progress up the sideline, which is not what he normally does. So he's turning him. And as soon as 3 sees the back of the offensive player's head, 3 yells go, and that puts everybody on a string. And so 4 takes that pass. 1 is immediately going to panic and turn around and try to hit 4. And if he does that, if he turns to pivot, it's going to be very hard for him to actually pivot back around the way he was originally facing. And so X4 is sprinting up to take 4 away. X5 takes that middle pass that 4 just left, and X2 is taking the sideline pass. And so 3 right here is going to be the only one open. And if that, especially if that guy just turned and pivoted to pass back to 4, we took that away, his chest is facing that sideline now. So 1 is not going to be able to make this pass to 3. And so, again, this is something that we do once the ball is reversed and it comes back this way. But really, for me, them going up here and them trying to pivot back and have their left hand, everything for me is to try to force it back to their left hand. And if he's right here, that's easy. If he comes back over here and he's pivoting to his right hand, he may be able to make a longer pass if we were to force the other sideline. So those were just basic calls. These are stunts. So again, I don't ever do all of this in one season, but I'm telling you all the things that I've done out of 2-2-1, and I think there's something here for absolutely everybody. So this is one set of things. And then I've got another set of stunts. So this is, I call, for simplicity's sake, I call mom. You just move one man. And if you move one man, you have 3 different presses with the same basic responsibilities. Normally your X3 is your more versatile defender. So when I was in high school, this was normally like a 6'2" to 6'4" guy. I usually had a pretty good wingspan and pretty good at reading. And if you think about that, that's a really good guy to have an on-ball defender in the 1-2-2 press. It's a really great guy to have in the middle of a 2-1-2 press. And it's a great guy to have in the back of a 2-2-1 press. If you had a team full of those guys, you could do a lot. But most of us, maybe not year in and year out, but most of us have one player who can kind of fit that description. Maybe he doesn't have the length, but he has the ability to read. He's quick and stuff like that. And he's got a good brain. Sometimes I want a better brain than I want a set of athletic skills. Let me just show you some diagrams real quick. So the 3 in the mom press, the 3 would be on the ball right there. And so the 1, 4, 2, and the 5, they are always in that box. And if you have a team that really is going to struggle with a lot of calls, but you don't want to be the same over the course of the year, I would do this because their responsibilities are basically the same in each press. 3 is the only one that has to learn the different reads. And maybe, again, I did this when I was coaching females. I did a little bit of this at a JV level and had a lot of success doing it because it was a lot to deal with. Because some people don't have a universal press breaker against all presses. And so they would have one press against this, and they'd have one press breaker against a different alignment. And I would fiddle around in the first quarter and figure out what they weren't doing well, and that would be the one that I stuck with. 2-1-2 press, I could do a whole session just on the 2-1-2 press. But you can have the 3 be the trapper. You can have the 4 be the trapper up the side, X1 and X4, and 3 be the interceptor. And I'm going to show you some of that in my other stunts. And then a 2-2-1, the 3 just goes to the back and he's the basket protector. So, that gives you 3 different zone looks, but it's really only one guy that's making a lot of the changes. The 1 and the 4, the 2 and the 5 are going to have the same basic rotations and trap areas and stuff like that if you want to keep it simple. And, if anybody wants more information on that, I would love to take your questions later by email or cell phone. So that's one set. That's something I would do by itself. I wouldn't combine it with this. This is a whole nother set of stunts. And again, I have the explanations here. This is if somebody wants a presentation, they can go back and look at this, but I've got a diagram for each one of these. So gone. Gone is called by X4. It signifies that his man is below the free throw line. So that would be the 2 that's circled there. 2 is below the free throw line. So that allows him to cheat up a little bit if he sees that. He's telling everyone that he will be the sideline interceptor. And so in our regular 2-2-1 press, the 4 was coming the 4 was coming up to trap. So I have a description over here. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not. But X4 is coming up like he is going to be the trapper, but he's really going to be the interceptor. X3 is coming around from behind, and X3 is springing that trap. And so when X4 cheats up and looks like he's coming up to set that trap, he's really going to be the sideline interceptor. So now that guy who's been used to one rotation, just that rotation of who is coming to trap him can really throw him off. And so I do this out of both a 2-1-2 alignment and a 2-2-1 alignment.
Any idea of stunting, whether it's zone press, man press, it really from the, for the offense, I feel like mentally it's in their head. They see that player stunting at them and they feel like they're coming. And, either they do sometimes or they don't, but they don't know when it's going to happen. So that element of surprise can be really, really challenging for them. And I like that you have some different wrinkles as to where the stunt is going to come from.
And so this would be one of the things, don't get beat the same way twice. So if we're getting beat by that down the line pass, I'm not going to get beat by that down the sideline pass. I'm expecting one of my seniors to say gone, and I'm expecting them to change. If we get beat by the sideline pass with the X4 staying there, then I've got bigger problems. And so just that one switch, maybe we only do it, once, but that one dribbling down with the head full of speed, he's going to stop and he's going to see that now that he's crossed the half court line, what is he going to do? If he doesn't have that sideline, he's going to try to pivot. He's going to try to make a left pass around a trap, with his heels right on the half court line probably. And that's exactly the kind of pass that I want him to make. If he makes that pass back and we don't get a steal, that's fine. But, that helps us. What did we lose by that? We didn't get beat by that. We didn't lose by that. And we gave ourselves a chance for success there. So
get that rambunctious dribbler too. If that one is like one of those players that just flies up the sideline, they see 4 take a step at him and they're trying to seal that ball and it's going right over 2's head and out of bounds. So just or 4 stunting and then coming back and getting a steal. So just a lot of good that can come out of a really, really simple stunt in that situation.
And this is this next one you would really like. I would encourage you to try this. So now 4 does come up, but instead of 5 being the sideline interceptor, 3 is basically in line with 1's field of vision. 1 can't even see 3 when X1 and X4 are coming to trap. And so it looks like that's really wide open. And you would be amazed how many times X3 is able to get that pass. And a lot of times, I will fully admit, a lot of times X3 is just able to get there and get a deflection and it goes out of bounds. But still, part of what I'm trying to do is mess with their psyche and make them hesitant. It's not always about steals all the time. If I can make that one not want to cross half court right there and really back up, X3 springing out of nowhere. I'm sure somebody does this. But I watch a lot of basketball. I haven't seen people make that rotation. And if you've got somebody, a really fast guy who can make that rotation, I think that's a really great thing to do. And you look at the second slide, you see how that ends up. 3's right there. You're strong in the middle. Again, what did you really give up? If he does make it, that guy's going to have made a really good pass over a trap. X3, even if he doesn't get the steal, he's going to be right there to defend. So, again, I don't think there's a real risk in doing that. I think it's way riskier for the offense to run their offense along the side than anything that I'm doing defensively.
They're going to have to leave their feet or they're going to have to make a lob pass, and either one of those is not what I would want to see as a coach if my team is trying to break a press. And, both of those are going to be in trouble in the long run. They might complete one pass, but more times than not, it's going to be bad news.
Right. So with each of these, I put the why. Why would I do this? really X3 slide is not a normal rotation as a sideline interceptor. And it's another thing to mess with the point guard. And, Bob Hurley always says you need to cut off the head of the snake. And, if you can really get into the point guard and mess with him, a lot of times, especially at the high school level, you're going to have success. Again, I would love to see a coach the day before they play us go over all of these things and have his guys execute it successfully. It's too much for players to remember. That's not their fault. It's just, nobody at any level can remember all of these things and what they're going to do. They just have to react the right way. And again, what we're trying to do is break their practice habits. And their practice habits are, when you're facing a 2-2-1 press and the guy comes to trap, get it down the sideline. And I'm basically using their practice habits against them.
Simple adjustments on defense make, bigger adjustments on offense. I feel like they have a lot more to teach in practice, and all you're doing is a simple adjustment with your middle player in that 2-1-2. So that's awesome. And I'll be honest with you, that's not something we ran a 2-1-2 when I was in high school. That's not something I've typically seen in the rotation. So that's a really cool one. I think a lot of coaches are going to like that.
Yeah. Red, we've all seen some facet of this. Goes a little bit, we can do this out of a 2-2-1 where we deny the first two guys, and X4 is just the center fielder right there. And so while these two guys are in denial, he's looking at 4, and the 4 is trying to loop it over. X4 is there to intercept, or if they catch it, there's an immediate trap. And so what most, especially high school teams do, is they bring everybody up towards the ball, when they see heavy denial like that. And, who doesn't love to see that, where everybody, the entire offense is right here and they've got to go against a 30-second shot clock. So I use it when I'm behind, or sometimes I just use it to speed up. If I don't think the game is at a tempo that I want it, I'll do this, just basically inject a little bit of nitrous oxide into our defense and get the game to speed up a little bit. I get bored just like everybody else. And if I'm starting to snore on the bench, then I'm sure people that are watching our game are snoring too. And, basketball's supposed to be fun. And I think it's most fun when it's played up tempo. Some more stunts. I know this is a lot, but again, this is basically a complete encyclopedia of what you can do with a 2-2-1. And this is where I'll end. I could probably talk forever on this. Read. This is kind of what I was saying with you. It's a 1-2-1-1 look. So it looks like a diamond. And I'll just do that to see how they're going to break it. Maybe I want the ball to go into the sideline. You could see the basic diamond responsibilities right there that I have diagrammed. But once the ball is in, I go straight man to man. And sometimes I'll do a 1-2-1-1. But, we honestly don't do that a lot. But even if people scout us and play us year after year, they know that I'm crazy enough to throw something in that I haven't done before. And so if I show 1-2-1-1, they don't know that I'm not going to do that for the entire game, And so read tells me how to read that. And then I start working on what I'm going to do based on what they did with read. So stay. If I do, that's again a diamond look. X4 doesn't trap, X4 stays on the ball. Why would I do this? Either I'm denying the pass back to the inbounder. Either 4 is good or 1 is bad. And if I want 1 to be the one dribbling it up, then I'll deny the pass back. A lot of teams, especially in high school, put their best player in. He passes to 1, and then he makes a sprint right to half court. He makes that diagonal cut that's really tough to guard. And so we take that away. And so that's why I would use this. I use it after a dead ball situation. and we just go straight into man. So while we have a diamond look, it's not a true 1-2-1-1 press, but they don't know that.
If you trap that first pass a couple times too, that player on the ball takes a step, especially thinking like high school wise, take
Yeah.
a step at that player in the corner, they panic, they go to throw it back, and they're getting their hand on the ball and probably laying it back in. So that's a nice little wrinkle for teams that like the diamond press, whether they want to go to the man look after or they want to stay in the diamond. But just stepping at that player and showing like you're coming, it's going to make them panic, especially if you keep trapping them. You trap in the corner 20 times, 21st time you just stunt at them, you're probably going to get an easy 2 points out of it. So I really like that wrinkle, Coach.
Squeeze, I was up in DC when Shaka was at VCU, and he's not really doing this stuff at Texas, but I watched as many of his practices and did everything that I could, and I just picked this up. So if you take what we just did with stay, X4 looks like he's staying out of that diamond alignment, but X4 is going to trap. So one sees that X4 came to trap, so he thinks he can go back. And 3 is coming out of, again, 1 can't see that in his field of vision, not when he's dealing with a trap by X4 and X2. And so 3 is stealing that back pass. 1 is looking for anything there in the middle. 5 is looking for anything up the sideline. And again, somebody might be able to make a pass out of that a couple of times, but it's going to be hard to do game in and game out, especially if they keep throwing it to that guy, that 1 on the side. I've showed a bunch of different things that mess with that 1. That 1 is not going to know what hit him if you have the right combination of these. And so as you're going through this and you look at this, I would choose 3 and then possibly by playoffs 4 things that will work well against who you play in your schedule. And I would just work on those things. I wouldn't try to do much. I would just try to be really, really good at a couple of these. And let's see, bump. These are 1-2-1 looks, but we go right into the 2-2-1. Why do I do this? It brings all the offense up and away from their scoring zone. Again, like a remote control, I place the offense where I want them. And so they tend to come up in this, but the ball gets in there to 1. 2 is on the ball. 4 just drops back in support, and we're in our regular 2-2-1 press, but it looked like a 1-2-1-1 press to begin with. Again, just something to mess with people. Slide. 2 was on the ball originally. The ball gets in. 4 comes up, and 4 takes him. So 2 has the short pass. We're right into our 2-2-1. It's just a different rotation. I usually use this when my bigs are playing up. I told you I like to press off of free throws. And so if my bigs are up there after a free throw, if it's a made free throw, I'll have X4 all the way up there on the ball. It'll look like a 1-2-1-1, and then we'll just slide right back into a 2-2-1. So, I wouldn't use slide a lot. I basically just use it when I have the bigs. I haven't really tried it with guards a whole lot, but I disdain being predictable.
Well, one of the points I wanted to make, Coach, as we kind of focus on the press is those little wrinkles that you keep showing, really simple things. Once they learn the core concept of the diamond press or the 2-2-1, whatever it is you're going to do, those wrinkles are very easy for players to do, but it causes a world of confusion for the offense. And as we've seen here today, there's so many different things you can do to add a wrinkle to the press that's going to really throw the offense off in situations. So, typically, just to kind of go back to like you guys as a program, the 2-2-1 alignment is your basic alignment. Would you say that that's the press you're using the most, or would you say that you're also, or is it vary from year to year? What does it look like for you guys in terms of what you end up in the most? I saw a 2-1-2. I heard some man-to-man. I've seen the diamond. I think we're very similar,
Yeah.
which is why I'm loving this right now, because I love pressure D and just a lot of things we do that I think are similar. But what is it that you really like, and you would even recommend for coaches who are looking at this and saying, where do I start? What's my starting point?
So that's a good question. I start by teaching our man to man, because our man to man again is everybody is supporting the guy that's guarding the ball, and I want him guarding the ball so tough that he gets beat. I really want him, when we're teaching in a practice, I want him to get beat. I want the ball handler to have to turn his head and not see down the court. I want his first thing to do is that he starts dribbling. And so if I can get that into them, then, and again, I start focusing on the mindset first and the attitude more than I care about the actual X's and O's. There's just something in us males as competitors where we want to, if we do that at the beginning of practice and we do it consistently, I don't care what kind of day they've had, they cannot ease their way into practice through a layup drill, a 3-man weave, and all that other kind of stuff. I'm going to know what they have and where they are mentally right at the beginning of practice. And I can fix that really, really quickly instead of fighting with somebody and trying to get them going. I know really quickly where they are. And so I start off with man-to-man because I think you always have to. But I do 2-2-1, and we do a soft 2-2-1 where we're just teaching the rotations, and I make sure they're good at that. And we become a little bit more aggressive, and then we start with the stunts, and I'll do a couple stunts first semester. We'll have our Christmas practices. Normally we play Division Ones, like I said, and Division Twos first semester, and then we play at our level second semester. And this year is going to be a little bit different, but I can get them really good film and help them be successful against really high level teams. And then I can focus on, I've got enough film on what our people at our level are doing and prepare for the end of the year. And I can start to put those things into my practice. And I know better what kind of team I have, what kind of stunts will work with the personnel that I have.
So just two more pressure-based questions as we talk about the press. You've talked a lot about that mentality in players and getting right after it early on in practice. And I really like that. I like to start with defense and have players, full court one-on-ones, something to really get them going early on too. So I really like that idea. How do you instill, I know we talked a little bit about practice, but thinking beyond that, how do you instill that aggressive mentality in your players? For coaches that are thinking about using more of a pressure defensive system, what are some of the other things that you do as a coach to really instill that aggressiveness in them when it comes to the defensive side of the ball?
We're constantly in a battle about what is better, the carrot or the stick. And, I do a little bit of both. I think as coaches, we need to be getting away from using the stick as much as possible, but there will still be times, I think there will always be times where we need to do that because it means to be, it needs to mean something to them to, especially if they're consistently losing. So, one thing I'm doing a little bit more of this year that I just haven't had the time to really put together, but the pandemic gave me a lot of time to get some things in order, is a competitive cauldron. And, if people are not familiar with that, Anson Dorrance has won, I think 20 some championships for UNC women's soccer, and Dean Smith used a competitive cauldron, and they're both different for those guys, but they have the same philosophy where you weight what's important to you. You take categories, and whatever's important to you, you put the weights on that. And so you award points for everything that they do. And so there's always a winner and a loser, and you reward if they're winning the competitive cauldron, then that takes away from some of their conditioning or maybe something else. And I know I'm getting a little bit off track, but we I try to make everything competitive. And so we divide our team into twos and we compete academically. And I have an academic captain and for each one of those. And we're trying to have everybody average an A, B, be on the AB honor roll, the dean's list. And so at Christmas, the losing team has to serve dinner to the winning team. And it's not a huge deal, but nobody likes to do that. And, it's just a way to, again, how you do anything is how you do everything. And, I want them to be competitive in academics. I want them to compete for who's going to get the most community service points. And I want them to compete for the scores in practice. And so I know that was a little bit of a rabbit trail, but I do think that it all matters. And I think if I'm teaching them to be aggressive in every area of their life, it's going to carry over to how we approach our defense. And if I teach them that some things matter, but some things aren't that important, then they're going to take that and that's how they're going to read it as a player from a coach. And we all do that even when we don't know it, but I'm trying to do that as little as possible. So we do a lot of one-on-one things. You've got to be able to guard one-on-one, and whether it's half court, full court, whatever, I've got a bunch of different ways of doing that, but playing one-on-one is just so good for overall basketball development and giving some constraints to the offense, but not a ton. I'll tell you one of my sticks that I use is we have a 45-pound plate that sits on a towel, and really the only thing that's ever used for is effort. And if they're not giving the effort that they need, they push that up and down the court. I call it cleaning the floor, and sometimes we've got a super clean floor at the end of practice. But they see towels sitting over there and they see a couple 45-pound plates, and that's really, really painful. Nobody wants it, and it's not to be mean. It's just to emphasize, effort really matters. And effort, if I don't notice it, if I don't call it out, then people don't do what you expect. People do what you inspect. And if they know that I'm constantly inspecting what they're doing, then they're more likely to take care of that themselves.
Well, sometimes you have to clean the floor to be able to get out there and play on it. So I really like that. And also just the competitive cauldron. I've heard a lot of coaches start talking about that now, and it's definitely an interesting concept and something I think works well. And really, I love how you guys compete in everything you do, because to your point, if that's your mentality, then it's going to carry into the games. It's going to carry into defense. So really appreciate your thoughts on that. And, just one last question when it comes to the pressure defense. How much of what you do is predicated on your team and your players in front of you? And how much do you look at your opponents and what their strengths are? And in terms of your pressure defensive system, does it weigh more heavily one way or the other? Is it a combination of both? I think that's a question that comes up a lot with pressure defensive teams. Like, what presses, should we be in the diamond press? Should we be more 2-2-1? Should we put more full court, pressure on man to man? Like, what's right for our team, and how much do I need to look at my opponents and weigh in what they do as I think about incorporating more presses with my team?
It's a good question. Against D1s, of course, we're going to be totally outsized, outmanned, they're going to be faster than us and everything. And so, part of what I'm trying to do is not win that game, but prepare my guys for games at our level. So sometimes, I'm not going to be stupid either. I don't want my guys to end up on ESPN getting dunked on and end up on the end of your highlight film. But I do want them to realize that we are who we are. And so sometimes in those early games, I do things that I know are not going to bring us success, but I know that it will bring us success at our level. And so I do look at levels. I am smart, against a team who is, super, super fast and executes really well. Maybe they use a press breaker where they always go middle. Maybe they always get in a 1-3-1 press breaker alignment. well, I'll put my best defender in the middle of a 2-1-2 press. And so I'll have my best defender. Usually it's a big guy that flashes to the middle, right? So I've got their big guy against my best defender 94 feet away from the basket. And I just look for things like that. And so I do look at what they do, but I change what we do, but I don't change because I don't want to have the philosophy that they scare me or they're going to beat us in this way. So I better, curl up in the fetal position in the corner and hope that the mean guy doesn't hurt me. That's not my thing. I just try to use the 2 or 3 things that will be the wisest for who we're playing, but also it's still who we are. I don't want to ever be in the habit of playing it safe. If you're a play it safe guy, then you shouldn't be pressing.
Yeah, it sounds like you don't believe in what some coaches say, which I don't as well, which is, oh, you can't press that team. You can't. That's a team. They're too good. You can't press them. And I found the opposite. Some of those teams that really were that good, when they went against a really good pressure defense, they actually struggled. And some really good point guards actually struggle against pressure defenses because a lot of teams are afraid to do it to them. So it sounds like you probably don't believe in that either.
Yeah, the criticism for pressing that I think holds the most validity is, in high school and at our level, really up through the D2 level, you tend to have postseason play where you're playing multiple games in 1 week. And, that can be really wearing. You may have to be smart about what you do, but I don't think, you dance with the girl who brought you. And I think that, you can use really smart rotations. Maybe you're not doing it for the entire game. Maybe you're not going crazy with it. But again, it's just as hard for a team who hasn't been facing that to have to prepare for one team. They just won that game and now they're playing the next game in the playoffs and they have to play against you and you've got all these rotations. It is just as hard or harder for them to face that as it is for your guys to press. And if you think about it, since day one of practice, you guys have been pressing, your entire practice, or you should be. If you're a pressing team, you should be pressing a lot of your practice. And again, if the other team hasn't been doing that, they may have some success early, but you can't get scared. Either you believe in it or you don't believe in it. And if you believe in it, your players will know if you're hesitant, and you can't change who you are in the postseason. And, like I said, I won 3 state championships doing it. I won 3 in a row, and I didn't have the same team. A lot of people look at that and say, man, you just must have had the right group of guys coming up through. And it wasn't that. It was completely different lineups for each of those teams. And we used different measures, but we did use our defense to win those games. We held teams to record lows in the championship game.
Well, Coach, this has been awesome, talking hoops. I always love doing it with all the different coaches I'm fortunate to connect with. But anytime I'm able to talk defense, it's something that's very near and dear to my heart, and especially pressure defense. So I appreciate your time. And I just want to leave coaches with one more question, which is, there's a lot of information here, tons of great information. And I appreciate you saying, if coaches want to reach out to you, you're willing to connect with them, which is awesome. I'm sure you're going to have some coaches reaching out. I'm sure you already do with the great job you do as a coach. But what advice would you have, for coaches that are thinking, I'm watching this, I would love to incorporate a full court pressure defensive system. Where do I start? So what advice would you have for coaches, or even how do I improve my full court pressure? But I guess really, what's the starting point, that they should be thinking about?
It may be old school. I'll tell you what really helped me was simply just taking a whiteboard and, thinking about what my opponents did, how they've been breaking pressure. And maybe you don't know, but, there's only so many ways that you can beat different alignments of a full court press. And so take those things, have your guys, their names on a board, either you have the magnets or you draw it, and figure out your rotations, figure out ahead of time, basically your mind reading. And if you mind read ahead of time, it makes everything so much easier because your players aren't going to be able to do that. They don't love basketball as much as we do. They don't spend as much time figuring all this stuff out. And, you do all that work for them. They don't need to know all that, but you break it down that way, and you know how you're going to rotate, how you're going to drill that. I can give you all of that if people want to reach out to me, but that's the way I did it. I found out what I believed in, and then I schemed against all the things that I could face. So you're going to have to do that in practice anyway. So you might as well do it before practice starts. Think about all the different press breakers you're going to face and figure out what you're going to do so you have an answer. You can't be stuttering in a timeout and just get out of it completely because you don't have an answer for it. You need to have an answer ahead of time.
I love it, Coach. And that's actually similar. I coached a little bit of football too in my day. And, it's like you're trying to figure out every blocking alignment and where the defense is going to line up. And obviously that applies to pressure defenses too. Where's the offense now going to put their players and what type of press break can they use to try to break different presses? So that's great advice for coaches. Really appreciate your time today. And I think we're going to, hopefully maybe we can do this again down the road because the 2-1-2 press comes up a lot, and we saw a couple of wrinkles that you do off of it, but it came up in one of the chats previously, I think actually 2 different times. Coaches are very interested in learning more about that, and I feel like it's starting to come back a little bit more. I know some teams run it, so I think there's a lot of interest in that. So maybe we can touch base down the road and talk, after the season, and talk 2-1-2.
Yeah, I love it. Coach, I know you know Coach Lynch, and Coach Lynch and I, he does that, and we talked about stuff this summer when, we were all part of 100 clinics, and, we do some things similar, and I learned some stuff from him, and he learned some stuff from me. So, maybe we could tag team on that. I think that would be really good to have Coach Lynch on as well.
Yeah, I've had him on once before. We talked practice planning, and I would love to have both you guys together and talk 2-1-2 press. So maybe we'll get through the season, and I'll be reaching out again. But I want to wish you success this season. I hope everything goes well for you guys. Best of luck. I'm glad you're going to have an opportunity to get the guys out there and get them playing, because I think they all, they need to get out there and
That's right.
and play.
That's right. Yeah, if you want to reach out to me on Instagram or Twitter, I'm Bruins Hoop Coach. We always have Bruins men's basketball as well. I'll give out my email address. It's bjuwarow@bju.edu. And, I can send you whatever you want. I am developing a course for CoachTube, but I'm waiting until practice starts and I can get some stuff on video. And I really think it'll be helpful for people to see videos. So please stay in touch. I'd love to help you. There's no secrets in the game. Coaches help me, and I want to keep that tradition going. And Coach, I thank you for doing this. Like I said at the outset, what you do is valuable. When scientists dig through the rubble and they look back at Twitter, I think you're going to be one of the golden people on Twitter, and people are going to look at you as the source for a lot of information. And I really appreciate that.
Well, that means a lot coming from you, Coach, and I appreciate coaches like you who are willing to share the game and help me to learn a little bit more about basketball as well. So thanks for your time, and have a great night.
Thank you, Coach. I appreciate it.